So welcome everyone. I think we can maybe start today. So just picking up threads from where we left last. Page number 347. We did the first paragraph and then we have to start from the second one today. So I'm suggesting that maybe we should read what we covered. This we should read again and then take on the newer one after this. So anyone who feels ready to read, um, yeah, please unmute and do the honors.
I can read from this side, right? This side of the method belongs properly to the yoga of self-perfection. But it is as well to speak briefly of these things here, both because we thereby lay a basis for what we shall have to say of self-perfection, which is a part of the integral yoga, and because we have to correct the false notions popularized by materialistic science. According to this science, the normal mental and physical states and the relations between mind and body, actually established by our past evolution, are the right, natural, and healthy conditions, and anything opposite to them, is either morbid and wrong or a self hallucination, self description, and insanity, self deception, and insanity. Needless to say, this conservative principle is entirely ignored by science itself when it is so diligently and successfully improves when it so diligently and successfully improves on the normal operations of physical nature for the greater mastery of nature by man. Suffice it to say here once for all that a change of mental and physical state and of relations between the mind and body, which increase the purity and freedom of the being, brings a clear joy and peace, and multiplies the power of the mind over itself and over the physical functions, brings about, in a word, man's greatest mastery of his own nature, is obviously not morbid and cannot be considered a hallucination or self deception, since its effects are patent and positive. In fact, it is simply a willed advance of nature in her evolution of the individual, an evolution which she will carry out in any case, but in which she chooses to utilize the human will as her chief agent, because her essential aim is to lead the Purusha to conscious mastery over herself.
Thank you, Shweta.
Yeah, complex. कुछ समझाओ.
Were you there last time?
I don't remember actually. But
Okay, so
usually I
yeah,
catch up
we
on the
did,
recordings. Yeah, but
yeah,
yeah.
we did touch upon this, but shortly we will talk about it. So we were reading that as one steps back from the usual needs and wants of the body and gains a little self-mastery, that if the body is hungry, then I don't have to become frustrated. So there is a distance between the body and me, and
Yeah,
that
yeah,
actually
yeah, yeah. I
this is
remember.
what we were talking. Yeah. So that brings, Sri Aurobindo says here, that brings a lot of clear joy. One can feel that joy when one has a little, even a little bit of mastery over one's body, and in this case, body. So that's not morbid as the usual patterns of society, or the usual conservative science would be saying that, why are you indulging in this kind of morbidity or asceticism? But it's not morbidity or asceticism. It's actually doing what we are here supposed to be doing. We are not here to be slaves of the body, mind, and life, but we have to, in our evolution, what appears to us with Mother and Sri Aurobindo and through our own experiences, that we slowly have to gain a little mastery and gradual more mastery over mind, life, and body, which are the instruments and not the masters. Right now, they are our masters. So, yeah, this is what we were touching upon last time. So, that this stepping back from mind, life, and body, in this case, we are talking about release from the subjection of body. So, that increases purity, freedom of the being, brings a clear joy and peace, and multiplies the power of the mind over itself and over the physical functions. To that extent, we can go, stopping the heartbeat, and it's not nothing new. It has been done by our yogis since time immemorial. So it's nothing new, but they are just one in a blue case that we get to know. So we think that no, we ordinary people, that's not our purpose. That may be a yogi's purpose, but not mine. But here it is the purpose of human life to slowly gain this mastery, not just for one or two yogis, because that itself is the fountain of joy that we connect with when we do this progress in ourselves. So this brings about, in a word, man's greater mastery of his own nature. So right now we are trying to master wind energy, hydroelectric, this power, that power, but even then we are not really masters of them. So this is what we truly want to do. We want to become, we don't consciously know, but all of us, our wants to fix another person and fix the outer situations. It's actually a distortion of that inherent want to become master of our own selves. So it's not morbid and cannot be considered a hallucination or self deception, since its effects are patent and positive. Yeah. And it is a natural movement of nature, slowly, that this self mastery must come. It's a natural movement, progression of nature. Otherwise, if human beings, this does not happen, then just like Jurassic, era, we don't see any dinosaurs anymore. So those those species which are now not really of any purpose may be wiped off by nature. One of the chances can be that it gets wiped off because it's not serving the purpose of nature anymore. So yes. So in fact, it is simply a willed advance of nature in her evolution of the individual. This self-mastery that one slowly has the capacity to gain, it is a willed advance of nature in her evolution of the individual. And we all see that after some time, with our usual ways of life, we actually become very discontent. And now we have bangla, gadi, property is there, wealth is there, family is there, children are there. Okay, you have a job, you have some interest. Now what? So this is what we crave actually, because without advance, one feels really haywire. Why am I here? So a stagnancy may come. In fact, it is simply a willed advance of nature in her evolution of the individual, an evolution which she will carry out in any case, but in which she chooses to utilize the human will as her chief agent, because her essential aim is to lead the Purusha to conscious mastery over herself. So I think this is very interesting because nature is not against us. We many a times in many different traditions it may come that as if Prakriti is wanting to do something else and as if eluding me and deluding me. But here he says that the essential aim of Prakriti, through all the detours and whatever ways she takes, is actually to so that the Purusha regains its stature. the lost kingdom can be reclaimed. Yeah, so this is where we ended in the last session. And now, so we can start from page number 347, this being said. So anyone if would like to read, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go.
Yeah.
This being said, we must add that in the movement of the path of knowledge perfection of the mind and body are no consideration at all or only secondary considerations. The one thing necessary is to rise out of nature to the self by either the most swift or the most thorough and effective method possible, and the method we are describing, though not the swiftest, is the most thorough-going in its effectivity. And here there arises the question of physical action or inaction. It is ordinarily considered that the yogi should draw away from action as much as possible, and especially that too much action is a hindrance because it draws off the energies outward. To a certain extent, this is true, and we must note further that when the mental Purusha takes up the attitude of mere witness and observer, a tendency to silence, solitude, physical calm, and bodily inaction grows upon the being. So long as this is not associated with inertia, incapacity, or unwillingness to act, in a word, with the growth of the tamasic quality, all this is to the good. The power to do nothing, which is quite different from indolence, incapacity, or aversion to action and attachment to inaction, is a great power and a great mastery. The power to rest absolutely from action is as necessary for the Gyan Yogin as the power to cease absolutely from thought, as the power to remain indefinitely in sheer solitude and silence, and as the power of immovable calm. Whoever is not willing to embrace these states is not yet fit for the path that leads towards the highest knowledge. Whoever is unable to draw towards them is as yet unfit for its acquisition.
Yeah, thank you. So, many a times it happens that since everything nowadays, earlier what used to happen is that we go to a guru and get the diksha and the initiation and, then go through the scriptures. Yeah, but right now, Google has become the guru for most of us. And on one hand, it has its advantages, but there are many, many disadvantages also. Because since uh, we have a nature which is lost in thoughts all the times and lost in images, many a times it happens that we may think that we may have certain realizations and this and that, I'm growing on the path and spiritually some siddhis are arising. People can have any kind of, experiences. And yet there are so many traps and bylanes and alleys that we would not get to know that we have again become settled in tamas, inertia, and thinking that we may have gathered some realization. So images can happen anytime. Ego jumps back at any experience and it claims it. It says, I am the one who has the realization. While when the realization may have been happening, and it's not that people may not have realization, when the glimpse is given of a true realization, in that space, one can say, in that moment, the egoistic consciousness is absent, and that is why the revelation happens. It's like a curtain is not there. But the moment that glimpse is over, because it can't stay for long, suddenly again the ego consciousness jumps back because it's ever present and at the same time not really true, but it's ever present. And it jumps back at that glimpse and it says, oh, I know now. I had that realization. I had that siddhi. I understood. So it is claimed, it is like overtaken by the ego, and we don't even get to know. So, uh, yeah, I'll come to why I'm sharing this. So, this being said, we must add that in the movement of path of knowledge, I'm sure all of us uh, have done their studies and uh, the readings of scriptures and everything, and path of knowledge would be what we call as Gyan Yoga, where through study, understanding, the usage of mind, intellect, we grow forward in clarity. So, this being said, we must add that in the movement of path of knowledge, we have seen this in very Vedantic traditions. There it is Gyan Yoga. Perfection of mind and body are no consideration at all, or only secondary consideration. So, what is required is to just kind of go to some state which is not filthy. Because right now, in the state of the mind, life, and body, there is filth, there is darkness, there are shadows, there are limitations. But there are also parallelly existing the spirit, which is non-dual. So what we do is that the spirit unites with its source, leaving the rest of the instrument exactly in the condition how it found the instrument to be. So he says that in the path of knowledge, where through understanding, mental, intellectual understanding, we realize the self, there the perfection of mind and body is not of consideration, because there we think that the lower remains the lower, but I do have a higher also within me, so let me unite the higher to the highmost, the source of it, because the lower, nothing can be done with to the lower, it cannot be improved. So that's why we see that there we don't talk about perfecting our instrument or purifying thoughts and being engaged in the little things of the day-to-day life. If there is a realization, then it's like an escape from the worldly things. So the one thing necessary is in this tradition, path of knowledge, the one thing necessary is to rise out of nature to the self by either the most swift or the most thorough and effective method possible. So just totally uniting in spirit to the realization that I am not uh, this, that. I am the Brahm, the Supreme. And yet the body remains in the same state, and I do not am actively engaging. I'm not actively engaging in the day-to-day worldly affairs as I would do, because as if the witnessing stance, it's like kind of takes you away from that day-to-day interaction. And the method we are describing, though not the swiftest, because there are so many things on the way which come up again and again, again and again. They want to be purified. They are very dark, filthy, full of dirt. So it's not the swiftest method. It's not the fastest. though not the swiftest, is the most thoroughgoing. So whenever we talk about thoroughgoing, it's like each perfect detail, each corner, each nook has been checked for purity and perfection. When we talk about thoroughness in work, that somebody works very thorough, like you can't find any imperfection in their work. It's done beautifully. Everywhere there is a harmony. So this method of integral yoga or self-perfection, self-mastery over the instrument, and also a self-perfection in mind, life, and body. There, he says that it's not the swiftest, but it is the most thorough. It takes care of each and every part of the being. And here, there arises the question of physical action or inaction. Now, this is where I was talking of what I was talking earlier about, one can have delusions. And here there arises the question of physical action or inaction. It is ordinarily considered that the yogin should draw away from action as much as possible, and especially that too much action is an hindrance because it draws off the energies outward. Now, this is what we feel also in our experiences. Many a times, what happens that when we are doing some ingathering, wanting to meditate or concentrate inwards, we don't want to engage with the word in that time. We don't want to exert our energies outside. We want to remain ingathered. This we also see in Mother's prayers and meditations, if some of us may recollect, where she says that I was in such an indrawn state and now suddenly my attention is totally drawn to the exterior. And then she says that this must too also, be happening for a purpose. So usually it is considered, and we see it all the time, that people who are considered spiritual, they are also considered that they should not be, if they are asking money or for their work, or if have some power, some name, some reputation, it is not considered nice. And it is especially coming from this older traditions, which have really left a deep conditioning in us, that those who are spiritual should not touch the money, should not, have power, should not uh, whatever, gain status. But Mother has said that actually this has to be reclaimed by purity. Like money is now in the hand of Asura. Just because spiritualists earlier said that no, I don't want to touch money. So money got into the hands of those who actually totally, exploit it and exploit others also for money. So now Mother says that money has to get back to those people who can make the right use of money. Hmm? So it's not that being spiritual, you should be away from money, because money, Mother talks about it, at many places, money is a sign of conscious power, something like that. And if one is consciously beginning to live life, when one can also use the money wisely, rather than it being in the hands of those people who would actually make a perversion of money. you know. So using the money and still extending it in a detached way, that is possible only with a yogin or a spiritualist. Otherwise we always in greed and lust for money, we just misuse it and also exploit other people. So it is ordinarily considered that the yogin should draw away from action as much as possible, and especially that too much action is an hindrance because it draws off energies outwards. So this, and then he says, to a certain extent, this is true. Mother and Sri Aurobindo both have talked about not indulging in excessive outer interaction, too much chit chat here and there, gossip, just general frivolous talk, engaging in just interactions like, talking about maybe things which are not really deep, but just on a shallow surface, we are just for the sake of talking, we talk. So both of them have warned us against this total scattering of energies, that happens in our day-to-day life. So to a certain extent, this is true. We must note further that when the mental Purusha takes up the attitude of mere witness and observer, so when we are stabilizing ourselves in this stance of being the witnessing consciousness. A tendency to silence and solitude and physical calm and bodily inaction grows upon the being. So this happens as a byproduct, that you would naturally, as a byproduct of that stabilizing more and more in the witnessing stance, you would not like to speak too much. You would not like to uh, too much engage in worldly affairs, this celebration, this function, that function, talking to this relative, that relative. One may not want to do that. So as a byproduct, as a side effect of that, this may happen: tendency to silence, solitude, physical calm, and bodily action. So there is the inaction because there is a peace in the body, there is a stillness in the body, and one wants to be there. There is a stabilization that is happening. So it grows upon the being, so long as this is not associated with inertia. Now we have to be very careful, because in this manifestation, peace has gotten inverted as tamas. And many times we see people who may be very peaceful with themselves. They are actually mostly in the state of tamas, lethargy, not really very alert and active. No, and yet peaceful. So this is something which we have to, if we want to, walk further, to notice that it's not tamas. And how would I, know that? I think we all may have our own indicators, but one thing which comes to me is that the moment one wants to get up or do some action which may be required, one is able to do. It's not that you are drowned in the peace of the body, that when there is an action required, then you're enjoying the peace so much that you don't want to move. Nothing, no inch of the body is ready to move. So I think we all have our own indicators, and we have to be careful here, very vigilant, that it's not tamas which is overpowering, which we may name as peace. So to be responsible for our own self, and to be responsible for the surroundings I am living in, and to be clean, tidy, neat, and to be alert and active whenever an action is needed. Not saying that, see, I have, become some realized person, that's why I'm losing interest in this materialism. People have all kinds of delusions that can happen. So to a certain extent, this is true, the want for solitude, stillness, peace, stability. But we must know further that when the mental Purusha takes up the attitude of mere witness and observer, a tendency to silence, solitude, physical calm, and bodily inaction grows up on the being. So long as this is not associated with inertia, incapacity, or unwillingness to act, like mood nahi kar raha, I'm not in a mood to act. So that should be taken as an indicator of I am now a slave of that uh, tamasic peace that is there. In a word, with the growth of the tamasic quality, all this is to the good. The power to do nothing. Now, again, not everything is good or bad. We all have advantages and disadvantages everywhere. So this is a beautiful power, because we all see a lot of restlessness in us, and the ability to just be with ourselves without doing anything, that has to also grow as a capacity. Because nowadays, especially in the age of social media, either we are with the phone, or either we are with the book, or either we are doing some activity, engaged, meeting a friend, talking, chatting, here and there, cooking. We can't just be with ourselves. So this is a quality, this has to be cultivated, the ability to just be with ourselves. So the power to do nothing, which is quite different from indolence. Now, again, there is a very thin line from the ability to be at will, to be able to do nothing and to be completely at peace with that. There is no restless prana going up and down, up and down. Oh, what to do, what to do? For 1 hour, I've been sitting like this, what to do, what to do. So no energy is going like up and down, up and down. So that ability, that mastery to be with ourselves doing nothing, and yet to be ready to spring it into action as and when required. So, which is quite different from indolence, like this tamas, lethargy, incapacity or aversion to action. That I'm not in a mood to act, that all these things are too material for me, not for me. So, aversion. So, that is different from a mastery which is over oneself, where one is able to be and do nothing and yet completely fine. So, this is a great mastery. It's a great power. Yeah, in just a second, I'll just go through it again. The power to do nothing, which is quite different from indolence, incapacity, or aversion to action and attachment to inaction. This also, So stickiness of any sort. Either I'm attached to inactivity and I am aversive to action. This has to be taken care of, because that means that if I'm in the grip of tamas. Is a great power. This power of doing nothing is a great power and a great mastery. The power to rest absolutely from action is as necessary for the Gyan Yogin as the power to cease absolutely from thought, as the power to remain indefinitely in sheer solitude and silence, and as the power of immovable calm. So all these are powers which have to be cultivated. The power to remain absolutely still. Mother talks about this, that before sleeping, make your body absolutely still. Nothing should move. Nothing at all. No thought movement, no feeling movement, nothing in the body should move at will. So as long as one wants to remain in that situation, one can. We will see, if we begin to practice, we will see that for some time we may be. But then what happens very soon, that the body becomes restless. It wants to move. Or the mind will become restless. Or some emotions will keep surging. So we may have a certain degree of, understanding here, stabilization here, but we can still grow in degrees. That earlier I used to sit, say, 2 minutes with stillness and absolute immobility. And now one is able to do it for 5 minutes, then 10 minutes, and slowly then increasing that ability to be still, absolutely still. And then also being alert the moment, with a click of a finger, the moment required, one can be alert. And that's the sign of a good meditation. If it has been done nicely, Jetsunma says, that meditation should make you more alert, not sleepy. So if meditation is making me sleepy, then I'm not doing meditation. I'm sinking into tamas. Or although for some time, some phase, it may be still helpful. But I have to see that if we are concentrating, being alert, staying as awareness, then awareness is forever active. So it may be still immobile, but the moment it is required in action, it springs back into action. So this power to rest absolutely, and Mother talks about this, that the many times in the name of rest we use entertainment. Let me watch some movie, let me watch some, take a break, 10 minutes, YouTube, or talk to a friend just to relax and unwind. I mean, all these things are otherwise okay, but if we want to really unwind and regather our energies, Mother says that the best thing is to rest the mind in absolute immobility, total stillness. Then when we rise from that total stillness, then it is a refreshed, rejuvenated being that rises up. So this, he says, that all these are absolutely necessary on the way as we grow further on the path, that it is necessary, the power to rest absolutely from action, the power to cease absolutely from thought, and the power to remain indefinitely in sheer solitude without any restless prana going up and down, and silence, and the power of immovable calm. And we can see that all of us can work upon this, we can cultivate this more and more in us. Whoever is not willing to embrace these states is not yet fit for the path that leads towards the highest knowledge. Because we are, now what we are doing, we are making our vessel ready, like patrita, as we say. Patrita, the container or the vessel is becoming ready so that it can have the highest. Imagine, a plastic glass and a glass which is made of solid, like very strong, solid rock, and who will be able to sustain the flow of Ganges, the flow, the march of Ganges that is Ganga, river, it flows into the plastic glass cannot contain it, but a rock solid container can contain it. So that's what we have to make. Our container has to be very self-perfected, ready, ripened, mature, so that when we are ready, the true knowledge dawns in. Yes. Whoever is unable to draw towards them is as yet unfit for its acquisition. So patrata, and then not being the patra. Patra would mean the container. Yes. So anything here? Anyone?
I felt that Shervind is that's something that came to mind when we were reading that how he's describing a process where we are an indulgent actor in our actions to a witnesser, where of course we've talked about witnessing consciousness, and then actually becoming a master where you through Jnana Yoga, because he talks about it that through the practice of Jnana Yoga you completely withdraw yourself from action. So I felt that it's a process as well, because sometimes, because he keeps mentioning that if we even, like I feel that he's saying that if he breaks this kind of process, the biggest risk is that, as we discussed, that we can go into inertia very quickly. So, for example, if I, without being perfected myself as somebody who is witnessing life, if I jump to being somebody who is completely taken a step back and become an enactor, the high chances are that rather than being an enactor, I go into tamas. So that's something I felt that, that how sometimes hastening the process can actually make it, because of a restlessness to hasten it, it can actually make it worse. And you have to be strong in your grounding to move forward. So you have to first be a very strong witnesser and kind of achieve that kind of immovable calm by being a witnesser, and then actually take a leap forward to actually completely withdraw yourself from the action, and then it will be perfected. That's something that came to my mind as well, because how it's sectioned from being an indulgent to a witnesser, and then completely actually withdrawing yourself even from the action.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, anything else anyone wants to add on? So आगे बढ़ते हैं, then we can go ahead. So he's still continuing, and it's good because especially in the synthesis, also in the life divine, we see that it's not very good to take little passages and try to, because there is a continuation, as you were sharing, that there is a process. So, and that he's integrating many aspects. So it's good to just go through completely what he shares and not just take up one little bit and then stick to that bit. So especially in these longer writings, we have to be conscious of that. So here we see that he still continues, and let's see what he says here. So yes, would anyone want to read?
Yeah, Monica, I'll read.
Okay.
At the same time, it must be added that the power is enough. The abstention from all physical action is not indispensable. The aversion to action, mental or corporeal, is not desirable. The seeker of the integral state of knowledge must be free from attachment to action and equally free from attachment to inaction. Especially must any tendency to mere inertia of mind or vitality or body be surmounted, and if that habit is found growing on the nature, the will of the Purusha must be used to dismiss it. Eventually, a state arrives when the life and body perform as mere instruments, the will of the Purusha in the mind without any strain or attachment, without their putting themselves into the action with that inferior, eager and often feverish. What is that, Monica? It's feverish.
Yeah, feverish. Yeah.
Yeah, energy, which is the nature of their ordinary work. They come to work as forces of nature work without the fret and toil and reaction characteristic of life in the body when it is not yet master of the physical. When we attain to this perfection, then action and inaction become immaterial. Since neither interferes with the freedom of the soul or draws it away from its urge towards the self or its poise in the self. But the state of perfection arrives later in the yoga. Until then, the law of moderation laid down by the Gita is the best for us. Too much mental or physical action then is not good, since excess draws away too much energy and reacts unfavorably upon the spiritual condition. Too little also is not good, since defect leads to a habit of inaction and even an incapacity which has afterwards to be surmounted with difficulty. Still, periods of absolute calm, solitude, and cessation from works are highly desirable and should be secured as often as possible for the recession of the soul into itself, which is indispensable to knowledge. So usually we know only two things. We get attached to what we are doing, this extreme, or we will not do anything. That will be, another extreme we go. But, this needs lot of, I think, tapasya. Otherwise, it is very difficult. In a small example, when we used to go to this, bhavan for arranging flowers everybody will be given one day, as comfortable as, they can choose their days. Sometimes I used to feel, if we generally two people will go. If anyone wants to join also, they can join, no problem. But, generally our ego nicely talks, I will do this very nicely. When she does, no, it is not so perfect. We cannot leave that, that I will do this very well. I can do this. I can manage this. I'll go get flowers. If I buy flowers, it will be beautiful. So I used to observe myself. See, if somebody does the sweeping and if I have to do the mopping also, what is this? How has she done this work? I used to observe how this ego comes in front, and we always think that we are best. So that inaction, we cannot do any, we cannot be, inactive there. We want to do, and we only want to do. See, when you have to do, we have to do. When you don't need to do, you don't need to. You can just be quiet. But that is not, possible for us. That's why I think this is, whole time, all life, tapasya. We need to do this tapasya every day, every minute, every second. Then only we can achieve this. At least we are able to read this. We know where we are, going wrong. Beautiful passage. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. What you were sharing reminds me of what we hear about Sri Aurobindo. That how his incident of this cigar thing, that he was just able to just give it up like that. So he used to smoke cigars, and then a couple of people commented, and then mother also, I think, then shared something with him, and just he just left it like that. I mean, no, that, what would happen of me if I would not be smoking cigar, that I can't live without it, nothing like that. So as you were sharing, that usually with us everything becomes an addiction or an aversion. Either I would begin to hate cigars, or I'm in so madly love with cigars that I can't leave it. So that chipchipapan, that stickiness that we have. And as you were rightly sharing, I believe, that resonate with that it would be a fruit of the tapasya and purity that non-stickiness comes. And when it is there, then we do it. When it is not there, then also completely okay. That our sense of self is not dependent upon anything. Yeah.
I think this will take so many, births.
Yeah, I mean, how does it matter?
Yeah.
Anyway, how does it matter? Yeah, when we read that if we are having joy on the path, whatever path that we have taken, then how does it matter?
Yeah, that is also correct. Yeah. No need to be in a hurry, slow and steady.
Yeah.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, anyone else who wants to add on here on what Shardari was sharing, or on the paragraph if any lines resonated? All right, so let's go ahead. At the same time, it must be added that the power is enough. Just to have that ability, that power, that if I want, immediately I can have immovable calm in my being. If I want, I can have the cessation of thought immediately at will. That power. At the same time, it must be added that the power is enough. The abstention from all physical action is not indispensable, So, and later on he shares that why it's required to have a balanced action and then inaction. Because since we ordinary beings, usually in our ordinary consciousness, we have the tendency to misjudge. We may think it's a realization, but it's tamas. And that is why a balance, then he says that moderation is the way, moderation. Little bit of inaction, complete solitude and rest, and then also some action. Because how do I know that I am getting into tamas? So that balance, he says, for us is very much essential on the path. So we'll come to that in some time. That power is enough. The abstention from all physical action is not indispensable. The aversion to action, mental or corporeal, is not desirable, because then there comes a sluggishness. Then when you want to think, you can't think. When you want to calculate, you can't calculate. When you want to sit up, do some work in the kitchen, or maybe drive, go for a bus ride, you can't do because there's so much lethargy. Let's leave it. Why to go? Things like that. So it's not desirable. Aversion to action, mental or corporeal, is not desirable. The seeker of the integral state of knowledge must be free from attachment to action. It's not that my sense of self is fully dependent on action, just like Sardaji was sharing in her example, that if I am doing the flowers, only I am doing the flowers, nobody else, because nobody else does it as nicely as I do. So sense of self is totally attached to the action. One day, one fine day, just leaving everything that your sense of self is attached with and testing yourself out. Am I easy? Am I calm? Or there is restlessness within? Especially those works which we are very, very closely attached to. For some people, it may be kitchen works. For some people, it may be taking care of a person. For some people, it may be what you consider absolutely necessary. This I have to do. Nobody else can do it. So it's good to take breaks in between, because that tells us whether my sense of self is attached with it or not. The seeker of integral state of knowledge must be free from attachment to action and equally free from attachment to inaction. So we understand that neither attachment to action, neither attachment to inaction. ऐसा भी नहीं है कि नहीं करना और ऐसा भी नहीं है कि बस करते ही रहना, वो भी नहीं है. So especially must any tendency to mere inertia of mind or vitality or body must be surmounted. And if that habit is found growing on nature, the will of the Purusha must be used to dismiss it. So if out of our consciousness we become aware that this is becoming, I am become too habituated to be here. Like we are settling down in a comfort zone, too comfortable somewhere. So pushing yourself away from that comfort zone. Changing disciplines. I feel that it's very good to experiment with disciplines, like sleeping disciplines or eating disciplines, kind of food that we are eating, the people we are eating with, time to time, I feel one should, experiment, because then when we keep moving, then we can be sure that we are not attaching anywhere. So with the will of the Purusha, that can be dismissed, that whenever inertia is settling in, it can be dismissed. Eventually, as Shardaji was sharing, it will be a long time. Eventually, a state arrives when the life and the body perform as mere instruments the will of the Purusha in the mind without any strain or attachment. So अब उनको कुछ नहीं चाहिए, nothing that the mind, life and body want from that action. It's a disinterested action, totally disinterested. If gets done, good. Doesn't get done, good enough. But the will of Purusha is being enacted. Otherwise, they have nothing personal motivation or hidden agenda that they're going to get. No sense of self is, nothing can be added on to the sense of self or removed from the sense of self if the action is performed or not performed. So eventually a state arrives when the life and body perform as mere instruments the will of the Purusha in the mind without any strain or attachment. So neither it is too much effort or neither it is like, your sense of self is attached. So it's not that you have to push yourself to do it. Nothing like that strain. Without their putting themselves into the action with that inferior, eager, and often feverish energy, which is the nature of their ordinary working. I can empathize with this fully. I've felt this feverish energy in me so many times. Like usually whenever we are acting, we are either too energetic about it. And that energy is mostly a attached energy. It's like a chip-chippy energy, sticky energy. So you come with full energy and enthusiasm to some work. But with that energy and enthusiasm, you're carrying a lot of stickiness. The rigidity of your own ideas to be followed and this and that. So this has to happen, Jivan Mukta. that the energy and the vigor is there. The moment you hear the call from within, you spring up into action. But the moment it is said that, declared that, okay, no game happening today, you are very happy to withdraw also. No stickiness at all, no drag, no sign of disappointment. So that is what I think, it's true joy. Totally a slave and child of the divine. That there is no personal hidden motivation from that energetic endeavor. So this is the feverish energy, the restless prana within us. All the time it wants to stick to something, wants to get something from some activity. So that inferior, eager, and often feverish energy, which is the nature of their ordinary working. So they don't, the instruments then, eventually a state comes that the instruments, mind, life, and body, would not do any action with that feverish kind of restlessness. Oh my God, what would happen? If somebody else does it, or this or that, or all kind of things may happen. They come to work as forces of nature, work without fret and toil and reaction, characteristic of life in the body when it is not yet master of the physical. So this is our characteristic when we are not yet our masters. That there is this restlessness, disappointment, vital disappointment there. If something doesn't happen, if something happens according to the liking, excitement. We all have touched upon that. Lots of excitement. And if something doesn't happen, lots of disappointment. So that swaying now is not there. Because there is no personal hidden motivation, no personal interest. No fulfillment to be achieved by the action or inaction. So they come to work as forces of nature, work without fret and toil and reaction, characteristic of life in the body when it is not yet master of physical. So when we are not yet master of our being, then our characteristic is fret, toil, and reaction. All of us have lived and still live through it. Fretting, toiling, and reacting. When we attain to this perfection, then action and inaction become immaterial. अब करेंगे या नहीं करेंगे, it doesn't matter. My sense of self is totally independent of the action. Such is the state of union within. So either a very important work gets done, or a very important work gets lost on the way. Nothing is lost still. No fretting, no toiling. So when we attain to this perfection, then action and inaction become immaterial. Since neither interferes with the freedom of the soul or draws it away from its urge towards self or its poise in the self. So such is the stability in the soul, such is the purity in the being, that whether one is involved in action, even then the ego self doesn't arise, because the stability has been gotten. And when one is in repose, which we hear in mother's prayers and meditations, there is a repose at times. There is an inaction. Even then, that inaction is not tamasic inaction. Such is the purity and union with the divine. That there is no separate will that exists, which either wants more lethargy or more action. So neither interferes with the freedom of the soul. If I am getting too much engaged in worldly affairs, at times it may be necessary. Like mother, was after Sri Aurobindo's passing, mother got very engaged and busy. Many a times she would not be having meals on time, like that. And yet it did not interfere with her integration that is there within. So he says that since neither interferes, neither action too much or inaction, it is not interfering with the freedom of the soul, or neither it is drawing it away from the urge towards self or its poise in the self. So action is also just for the divine, in the divine, with the divine, and it's not interfering that, oh, I want my quiet time, now too much of action. So that quietness and that stability within the divine presence is always continuing. But as we touched upon that again, it grows in degrees. Like we can't just one fine day arrive at it in our dream. One cultivates it, one wants it, wills for it, aspires for it, and works for it. So, but this state of perfection arrives later in the yoga, and till then, now what to do for all of us who are, aspiring souls and yet not yet there, if we can say, till then the law of moderation laid down by the Gita is the best for us. Now he talks, that what is the practical for ordinary consciousness, what is the practical implication? Too much mental or physical action then is not good. Too much mental or physical action is then not good, since excess draws away too much energy and reacts unfavorably upon the spiritual condition. We all know this, that when we are just too much engaged in social affairs, this relative, that friend, this family, that, cooking, all the taking care of the house, we all crave, if we are, true to ourselves, for some quiet time, to have that balance, to have some solitude, some calm, some ingathering. So too much mental or physical action then is not good, since excess draws away too much energy and reacts unfavorably upon the spiritual condition. Too little also is not good, since defect leads to a habit of inaction and even to an incapacity which has afterwards to be surmounted with difficulty. So if we let it grow, it grows like a canker, and then it's difficult. So if you catch the disease while it is brimming up, it's easy to kind of put water on it. But when the fire blazes up high, then you have to call the fire workers, and so much of water has to be wasted to bujhao the fire. So why not to become conscious of the ripple of tamas when it is there, and use the will to dismiss it? Like, I think there one Shada, he was talking about that, how that loop or reel goes on in the head. And then the moment one sees going there in the same groove, which is again tamas, because being in the same groove is tamas. It's inertia, that, the older groove of thinking and feeling, you are again rotating in the same, like the hamster on the wheel, and to stop, as Shada, you were sharing that, I just said stop, shut up. So that's where we use will that is given to us, and we stop going from that, again the inertia of the older pattern. So too little also is not good, since defect leads to a habit of inaction and even to an incapacity which has afterwards to be surmounted with difficulty, till periods of absolute calm, solitude, and cessation from work. I believe this is like the fountain of life that we can give ourselves, especially when we are engaged in certain roles and responsibilities, living in the grahast jivan. This is very important, to shed off all the roles and responsibilities, not to be a mother, not to be a daughter, not to be a daughter-in-law, completely just to be a nobody in that period that we get with ourselves. No role, totally naked with ourselves, inwardly, completely without any roles and obligations and responsibilities. I think that really connects us with some real, source of joy and fountain of energy within us. So still periods of absolute calm, solitude, and cessation from works are highly desirable and should be secured as often as possible for that recession of the soul into itself, which is indispensable to knowledge. So I think this is a good point to stop today, because this is like a practice for us. I'm sure all of us are at it, but again, there is always scope for improvement. So we have a practice that we can cultivate to be living a life which gives joy in living rather than becomes a stress to live. It's almost like when an actor knows itself that he's an actor and not the roles that he plays. He when he reposes as just that actor without any roles, then he actually gains so much energy in that repose that when he goes back into some script or a story, he can actually act in a detached way and yet totally in the role because he knows that he's the actor beyond any role. So that detachment also, by effect of it, comes, and more vigor also comes, the enthusiasm also comes, and yet there is a non-stickiness, detachment, because one knows oneself as beyond the role. That nothing is, on my shoulders. I may be a mother, I may be a daughter, but one fine day, if I go away, I cross over, I leave the body dead, the world will still move on. So that doership can be let go of every moment when we take that repose. Because otherwise we think that we are so important that, oh my God, what would happen if I stop the work? The house or family would come to an end, nothing would come to an end. We are not that important. We are all dispensable. And yet at the same time, indispensable also, because each one is very unique. So ordinary yet very extraordinary. Yeah. So yeah, we can take any last comments. Anyone? What we just read.
Just reminded of again a saying that I really like by Rupert Spira, that he says that I, the light of pure knowing, am to experience what a screen is to an image. But that's something that what you're saying about, we have even read in Jivan as well, about always being aware of this difference between the screen and the image, and always knowing that we are actually the actors and not getting identified with it. But I really like that as well. So yeah, I thought of sharing.
Yeah, it's a very good metaphor that he uses. Very helpful. Thank you. Anyone else wants to add on? Okay, so assuming nothing at the moment, so we pause here for today and we pick up the thread next time from here itself. So just taking one last moment before all of us leave for the day, sharing, dedicating all the clarity, joy, delight, understanding, sharing the merit with all the sentient beings. May all of us have joy in the heart, peace in the heart, simplicity in life, and lots of progress and joy in our life. And also wishing it for the people who we are living with. Many times we forget that they are also sentient beings. So just including also, may their hearts be at peace and minds simple and complicated, and may they have lots of joy and progress in life. Thank you. Thanks everyone.